Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have much time since after this session is your lunch, so we would like to keep it on schedule. I would like to comment straight away. Actually, my job is very simple. I just have to manage these four personalities on the stage to keep to their time and to make sure that you don't fire a question at them which is beyond the scope of today's session. So please keep your questions and comments to the issue at hand. We are talking about ASEAN and India, partnership in the new world. You can frame your comments and questions within this box. For me now, I make just 2-3 quick remarks. My job is made easier by the two foreign ministers. They have talked about everything to talk about ASEAN. I don't think I can add any more. The main thing that I want to stress is that ASEAN and India, we have done quite a lot in the last 25 years, and there are many plans on the table. Some of them have been implemented. Some of them have to be adjusted because of the new geopolitical situation that we are all in today's world, with China recent power and the United States of America very distracted with their own domestic issues. So ASEAN will have to work closely with everybody, in this case, in particular with India, to move our respective agenda forward. And there are a few big things on the table. You have heard the minister talking about it just now, and I'm sure the panelists will elaborate on some of these items that concern both sides. The second point I want to make about ASEAN and India is that we have not seen anything yet. All those things that we have already implemented for ASEAN and India partnership, they are very, very small in the overall context of the potential of ASEAN-India partnership. So a lot more can be done. And it is important for us to try to extract the best of this potential and to expand our relationship beyond what we know today. The third thing about ASEAN-India is that we have to also try to find a way to demonstrate the ASEAN-India partnership contributes to the kind of situation in the global context that we like to see being strengthened or being promoted in a positive manner. So what I mean by this, we are in ASEAN open to the world trade. We are promoting free flow of business and investment, and now more and more the digitalized economy, the benefits of this digitalized economy have to go deep into our respective countries, our societies. All this means that we need to do a lot of work together with India on the international stage to continue what we have been doing at international bodies such as the WTO, such as the UN, and so on and so forth, and to strengthen the kind of multilateral system, the kind of rules-based system that we have, which help to bring free flow of money, capital, free flow of opportunities, and more importantly, the kind of trade relationship that we have seen flourishing in the last 30 years. So whatever happened in the United States of America, whatever happened in China, we have to think of how ASEAN, together with India, can contribute to stabilizing the global situation and continue to use what we already know to go to the next level. There will, of course, be changes, but these changes will have to be developed in cooperation with every parties involved, in cooperation with all the countries concerned. And the most important thing is to minimize the disruption to a system in global trade and international relations that we are all familiar with. Okay, so that's all I will say about ASEAN India at this time. I'd like to invite Ms. Preeti Saran, Secretary East in the Ministry of External Affairs, India, to deliver her remarks. Ms. Preeti, please.
Am I audible? Yes. Good morning, Excellency Ambassador. Good morning to my fellow panelists and, of course, to this wonderful audience. Very good morning. And on behalf of, I think, the rest of my panelists, I would have to especially thank the audience for kindly staying back after the star attraction in the speeches made by our External Affairs Minister and the Foreign Minister of Singapore. We had imagined that we'd end up having a drawing room conversation. So it's very heartening to see all of you sitting here. And thank you all for participating in today's panel discussion. I hear that Ambassador's Excellency has already given us instructions that we should start with just 5 minutes of opening remarks, and then we could move into interactive question-answer mode. So in these 5 minutes, I would begin by what, Ambassador Excellency, you said, that of course, in spite of what the relationship today is, that there is an untapped potential which has not been utilized, which is a fact. And it is really for us to determine whether the glass is half empty or half full. And I would say that in spite of the untapped potential only shows us the way forward in this new era. But traditionally, and you've heard our two ministers in the morning talk about India-ASEAN relations, where it is poised, whether it is in the context of our civilizational historical ties, or how the diaspora wove closer linkages, or whether it is in current day context. But I will just stick to the immediate. This is the year that we are celebrating, 25 years of India-ASEAN relations. The celebration started last January in 2017, and significantly, we chose the topic of cultural and civilizational linkages to remind us of the journey that we have traversed all these centuries. And it'll culminate in a commemorative summit that will be held in January on 25th, where all the 10 leaders of the ASEAN countries would meet in Delhi along with our Prime Minister. And then all the 10 leaders would also be guests of honor for our Republic Day. Now that is unprecedented. You all know how we celebrate our Republic Day with a huge grand parade down Rajpath, the main avenue in New Delhi. And invariably we've had, and from 1950, again significant that the first chief guest to our Republic Day parade, the first foreign dignitary, was in fact President of Indonesia, the then president. And that now, after 70 years, when we mark 25 years of India-ASEAN partnership, 15 years of our summit partnership, 5 years of our strategic partnership, we would once again welcome 10 leaders come together is an absolutely unprecedented step. And the fact that they've all accepted that invitation shows the importance that they attach to this particular relationship. Likewise, in the last 3 years, you would have seen a very strong and high-level engagement that we've had at the political level. Our Prime Minister, our President, our Vice President, and Prime Minister have visited all the 10 countries in these last 3 years. And again, we've had very significant interaction and visits from the ASEAN countries into India as well. And this year, as Singapore assumes the chairmanship, of course, we look forward to welcoming Prime Minister Lee in January, but we certainly also look forward to a visit by our Prime Minister. The fact that the Indian Prime Minister, ever since the summit-level meetings have been instituted 15 years back, the Indian Prime Ministers have consistently attended the India-ASEAN Summit that are held on the margins of the ASEAN annual summits. So this kind of high political engagement is where, you know, the 3 pillars of our ASEAN-India engagement is poised, which is really measured against political security, economic, and cultural. That is the bandwidth within which we function. We have always articulated, in the 90s it was called the Look East policy, but in 2014 when our Prime Minister participated in the India-ASEAN Summit in Naypyidaw, he converted it into India's Act East policy. The Act East policy, and people have asked me what is different between the Act East and the Look East policy. Well, to begin with, the enhancement of our engagement is much larger. The focus is more on implementation. the focus has enhanced, gone beyond just economic integration to strategic, defense, political related cooperation and engagement on a very intense level, a very high level. Certainly the economic indicators in terms of trade and investment figures have improved. Cultural component, including by the contribution of the Indian community or the Indian diaspora, has also enhanced. That is the other aspect of India's Act East policy, where we have placed ASEAN at the center. So really when we say we are acting East, really we focus on ASEAN at the fulcrum. ASEAN is the heart of India's Act East policy, where we have repeatedly focused on ASEAN unity, ASEAN centrality in the regional security architecture of the Indo-Pacific region. The reasons why we give so much importance to ASEAN, apart from the historical civilization ties, is the fact that the link, this is the area of growth. India has been growing at a remarkable pace either. And I think it is essential to engage with the 10 important countries of ASEAN, bilaterally as well as in the ASEAN format, to ensure that if the Indo-Pacific region continues to remain an area of growth and development and dynamic as it is, I think peace and security is an important component of this particular engagement. And so this is the broad contours within which we operate. On the economic side, I'd be happy to take questions. I wouldn't want to repeat or something that you're already familiar with. So I'll hold my comments for subsequent discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Preeti, for that short and sharp delivery. Now, I'd like to invite Dato Sri Devamani from Malaysia. You want to go there? Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Thank you very much to our friends here. I'm very glad to be here to share some thoughts on ASEAN. We have experts from Singapore. We've got experts from US and, of course, India. And I'm from Malaysia, from the Economic Planning Unit. I like ASEAN-India Partnership, New World Order. It's a huge 3-hour lecture to be put into 5 minutes. So can I go quickly? I run very fast. Please bear with me. Thank you for your presence. You're still here after a large crowd is now. Thank you very much. So let's talk about ASEAN Summit. The ASEAN framework itself in 2009 already have the framework for development. When ASEAN met in 2009, they came up with this framework on ASEAN Political Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. Everything is in place. As far as ASEAN is concerned, we are quite developed in terms of multilateral development processes, as you can see there. And we focused on people-to-people connectivity. Malaysia's or ASEAN's success to India is to people-to-people. A lot of businesses are going on an individual basis, not on an institutional basis. And something about that spirituality of that motherland. Every Indian from India, from Malaysia, wants to go there to pray. You know, the power. I myself returned from Tirupati recently. And you'll be shocked, there are 18 tons of Malaysian coins in Tirupati. You know, they want to send it back. I'm talking to Central Bank how to bring it back, you know, because coins cannot be transported so easily. So that is the power of Malaysians going there. But in terms of economy, I think China has moved in very aggressively into Malaysia and this part of ASEAN. And this is something that's very concerning. So let's go on to the next one. The ASEAN-Indian Summit is also in place. In 2016 to 2020, we have a combined population of 1.8 billion, India and ASEAN. That is huge. That's about 30% of the global population. And the plan of action has been very clearly set out. Plan of action on science, technology, on renewable energy, food security, tourism, climate change, and connectivity. And the private sector is supposed to move this, but it's slow. I accept the views of our moderator just now, that things are slow. Let's be very frank about what is happening. And of course, the RECP is really not in the plate yet, which is quite important, I think. Let's go on to the next one and see the Malaysian agenda, because Singapore is matured. Many Indians are in Singapore, in fintech, in many things, you know. But Malaysia is a growing market after Singapore. If you want to look at Malaysia as your central to go through what ASEAN, it's good. The cost, of course, with due respect to Singapore, is about 30% or 20% of Singapore. So we are there waiting for you. Come. We got 2 million Indian diaspora there. 2 million. One of the biggest outside India. And come, please. And you look at that. The 10th and 11th Malaysia plan massively did a transformation plan. Action plan by the Prime Minister today, Datuk Sri Najib Tun Abdul Razak, because bureaucracy was always the problem of Commonwealth countries. And it was always a problem of Malaysia. Bureaucracy. So how do you crack this? He brought some of the best brains of the private sector, young, dynamic fellows throughout the world, 136 of them, put them in labs. For days and days I was there, brought the bureaucracy inside. They were fighting and came out with a transformation agenda. First is the economic transformation, 11 sector focus. Samsung is very much Korea. They do not talk about too many things. They focus on certain areas and they build that area into a deep speciality. So that's what he thought. 11 sectors focus with the strength of Malaysia. Agriculture, education, so forth. Greater Kuala Lumpur is going to be the wars of cities. No more nations. So Kuala Lumpur must become so dynamic. I'm sure you love Singapore. I'm sure you love Singapore for obvious reasons. So giving that, then 92% of the economy of the nation must be driven by the private sector. The government just becomes a facilitator. And of course, we have government facilitation. 100% foreign companies can own. Last time we had affirmative action of 30% Bumi Putras. Now you have 100%. If you're on vital sectors, then the small and medium enterprises, which is going to be the backbone of any nation, economy, has to be revitalized, revolutionized. Then you go on to mega infrastructure projects, mega connectivity, ports to ports, east to west, north to south. It's going on now. You come to Kuala Lumpur, it'll be easy. The government transformation, very, very important. Liberalization and standardization, reform regulations. There's an economic council now, every Monday PM meets for projects that come from outside, straight away. Within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, move on. That has to be done because you are running at Usain Bolt speed. The world is running at that speed. You want to walk, you die. Tax reforms, FDIs. You can come back and find out from us. There's too many details to share with you. National Transformation 2050. Right now, we are preparing a blueprint for 2050. I will talk about the 2050 agenda later a little bit more. So that is going to be the future. Now, what are you going to do about knowledge economy? What are you going to do about automation and modernization? It's coming. It's coming. You know? And the wealth distribution, which is a problem of the world. Internationalization of GLCs. Malaysian GLCs are going throughout the world now. Petronas has gone everywhere. We are now using Khazanah to move everywhere because the wealth cannot be generated from the nation itself. You got to go to throughout the world, which is happening by the West. The Western world did so. China is doing so now. And the youth development, the regional physical trade connectivity. That's why we are here today. The youths are going to be the core of the future. And if we don't worry about them, we're in trouble. And India is very lucky. You got 400 young people to explore. And the multilateral relationship. Going to the next one, the Malaysian Indian diaspora. Okay? Can you move on, please? Malaysian Indian diaspora. The Prime Minister is the best support of Indians in Malaysia today. Never before unprecedented, the reforms taking place for the Indians. Because we are a minority, we have left behind. We came in as indentured laborers. My father was an indentured laborer. Today I'm here. And this man said, first Tamil school, there are 530 Tamil schools in Malaysia. He has spent 1 billion in 7 years to reform education for these poor. Entrepreneur and business development for the Indians alone. We have given 1.3 billion in 6 years, with 32,000 Indians benefiting from micro credits right until to mid financing. We have an equity where we want to be part of the national equity structure. The Bumi Putras were given tremendous impetus in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So when you told to the PM that Indians are lagging behind, lagging behind. He has given us now 4 billion. We are just going to launch in this month another 2 billion, where there are about 6 to 7% dividends is given for GLC companies to any Indian who invests. Specifically for Indians. This is how. This is called engineering process. The Indian civil service, civil society, how do you develop Indians in the country who are poor? The government doesn't do it. We empower NGOs. PM has given 200 million to probably 300, 400 NGOs throughout the country. And education, youth, housewife, single mother, you name it. And of course, the higher education, PM has this year in his budget plan, budget for 2018, said 7% must be given to Indians. Civil service across the board. And higher education, 7% must be given to Indians. This is a policy structure. Very, very important. Skill trainings, national Little Indias. Everywhere in Malaysia now we got Little India. After the Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Malaysia, PM was very excited. Now you want a Little India, you go to Sungai Petani, you go to Penang, you go to Ipoh, Kuala Lumpur, Johor Bahru. Everywhere we got Little India. You can come live India there. Klang. This is how it's going. And of course, it's given us a lot of money for temples. We've got about 2,500 temples in Malaysia. We've got the language. You need what? You want Hindi, you want Gujarati, you want Punjabi, you want Tamil, everything is there. So it's fantastic. Okay, well, let's go to the New World Order. This Malaysia, I'm luring you to come to Malaysia. Sorry. We are there for you. So let's go to the New World Order. What's going to happen? This is real. The nationalism and popularism. Donald Trump won because of obvious reasons. He spoke popular things. May not be very vital for the nation, but he can win. Macron, Europe. New Zealand, imagine New Zealand. This change is really serious. This nationalism and popularism against liberalism and socialism. You know, the post-Cold War is changed. Asia is the next century. US, Russia, and Europe are no more the heroes of the future. Donald Trump, US first policy has forgotten. TPPA, gone. Climate change, gone. Okay, cyber security, China, US, and Russia, they are playing a very serious role in cyber. And where are we? Where are we? Because that is going to conquer the economics, the connectivity. Your Indian and Malaysian Indians, youths will now follow American style of life, not the Indian style of life. The soul will be lost. The mind can be conquered. So this will be the future. The global warming is serious. Economic and technology espionage. Huawei and Oppo has gone all throughout the world as equated as iPhones. So these are the future. The people's power and political stability. The cyber war, the social war, which is fake news, which will have leadership change. And that will bring impact to policies and implementations. We have to see this. The global trade imbalance. Serious. The neo-capitalism. Bangladesh, $1 t-shirt sold 20 US in America. So this is the issue. The raw materials, the scarcity of raw materials. The human resource which became complacent because we bring up children in a lazy environment because we are guilty of not spending time with them. So this is the issue. The productivity level and the consumer cost on companies and consumers. Imagine China has gone up 6.8% in 2016. And in the IMF says globally 6.5% inflation and corporate debt 65% on GDP. So this is serious. And the youth disillusionment. No nationalism. It's globalization. Psycho-substances, illegal drugs, ice, sky high, there are many names. There are 800 new illegal substances produced in the labs in the US. Imagine 16 to 25 years old children in America, 22% of them are into that. And the university students cannot take the pressure, they are into this. This is dangerous. Unemployment will be created, automation. What are we going to do with them? The next gen technical revolution, I go very fast, huh? Very fast. Can I go to the next slide, please? So you imagine, electronics, I'll skip one because no time. He says finish 5 minutes.
10 minutes already.
Yeah.
It's already 10 minutes.
Okay. 1950 to 60s, you had so many, 7 major companies on electronics and digital. 70s to 80s, we got 5 mega companies. 90s to 2010, 33 multinational companies. Now the mergers have brought 13. So Alibaba and Amazon may come together one day. They'll sweep everything because they have got the money power, R&D. Imagine, this is going to happen. Artificial intelligence. China has got the biggest company, Bytes. 3.11 billion put aside for this artificial intelligence research. 70% of the top 100 companies are in the US. It is real. So imagine, by the side, I've given some, this one. So next gen, no, go on to the next one.
Yeah, one more minute.
Okay, I'll finish. Capital market. Let's go on to the next one, please. I'm skipping a number of slides. You look at these big companies. The top companies who has got control of the equity share, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. Imagine. They are about 60% of the capital market. And this is going to be global. And look at the capital market below, October 2017. Infotech companies, 24.5%, finance, 14.7%, healthcare, consumer industries. Where is India in ASEAN? Go on to the next one. The monetary revolution. Global financial architecture, cryptocurrency, bitcoins, reaching nearly 20,000 US. And when he started it in the early, in 2000, late 2000s, he nearly got into a litigation process. Today, countries are trying to find regulatory framework too. Even Malaysia is trying to do it. Australia has cleared it. India is moving towards it. It's real. And the medical futurism is going crazy. India is well known for its medical things. We are waiting. So what I feel that eventually one more matter, can I go on please? Food security. India has much to offer. Everybody is going back to organic farming. Vegan revolution is taking place. Look at the rise of vegans in America from 2014, 600%. 6% Americans are vegans. India has got so much to offer. So much to offer. We are looking for you. Look at the drumsticks. Drumsticks, 1 kilo of drumstick in Korea is now 1,000 ringgit Malaysia. There are farms in India, I heard. So I want to go fast. Then the last one, my last flight. Sir, I'm finishing, sir.
Thank you.
Wait. India, ASEAN future. I put aside all that for you. And Narendra Modi, he said 5 T's: trade, talent, tourism, tradition, technology. How we our coherence in spirituality must translate into economy. Only when money comes, your culture, your tradition, and togetherness will be built. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, we won't give you any more question time afterward. Okay, next speaker is Professor Kishore Mahbubani, who has just retired from the Lee Kuan Yew School. He can tell you more about it, but he is still with the National University of Singapore. Professor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Keng Yong. Thanks for mentioning that I have no longer dean. But I'll still keep up to my tradition, which I kept as dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and make 3 points, as I always do. The first point is, what is this new world order we're talking about? The second point is, what is the implication for geopolitics? And the third point is, how does it affect the ASEAN-India relationship? Because that, I think, is at the core of what we're trying to discuss in this session, which is about ASEAN and India and the New World Order. So what is this New World Order? And the trouble with the phrase New World Order is that it's been so overused that people are not aware that we are living in the most amazing time since human history began. We have seen more change in the last 30 years than the past 300 years or even 3,000 years. And so everything is changing. But if you ask me to give you a brief description of what this world order is, I give it with 2 points. One, is the end of the era of Western domination of world history. And two, you see the return of China and India. Why return? Because from the year 1 to the year 1800, the two largest economies in the world were always those of China and India. And it's only in the last 200 years that Europe took off, North America took off. So the past 200 years have been a major historical aberration. And now we're going back to the normal. But everything is going to change. And in a book that I hope to release in London with Penguin UK, with a very provocative title called Has the West Lost It?, I point out that things like Donald Trump, Brexit, all these things are a result of the major revolution in world history that we are seeing today. So that brings me to my second point. What implications does it have for geopolitics? And all I can tell you that when it comes to geopolitics in the next 10 years, my advice to you is to put on your seat belts, because we're going to go through another amazing transition in human history. Today, the number one economic power, in fact, the number one comprehensive power, is the United States. Number two is China. But I guarantee you, within 10 years or so, the number one economic power, and in PP terms, really number one, will be China. Number two will be United States. And everybody will tell you that going back for 2,000 or 3,000 years of human history, whenever the number two power is about to overtake the number one power, you will see rising levels of tension between US and China. What is actually abnormal is that things are very quiet now. That's abnormal. But that's partly because, as you know, Donald Trump is preoccupied with other things. There are new books come out, new tweets come out, and so that's a sideshow. The real show is coming. And all this brings me to my third point. As the US-China competition heats up, the one region in the world that could feel it the most is Southeast Asia and ASEAN. And ASEAN's already felt a few shocks. In 2012, as you know, at the famous ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, for the first time, ASEAN couldn't agree to a joint communique. That was a reflection of the US-China relationship affecting ASEAN. So ASEAN will be under high stress in the next 10 years. So what is to be done? And this is where, and this is the key point I want to leave with you, that we must go back to history and remember that for a lot of Southeast Asia's history, the primary source of cultural influence in Southeast Asia was India. In fact, out of the 10 ASEAN countries, 9 out of the 10 have what's called Indic or Indian civilization basis. And this is important, because if you're going to see the return of history, we should also see the return of cultural links, the natural cultural links within India and Southeast Asia, and we should use that 1,000-year relationship, long-standing within India and Southeast Asia, to build an extremely high-trust relationship between India and ASEAN. And if we can build a high-trust relationship between India and ASEAN, that will help to protect ASEAN as it goes through very difficult times in this remarkable new era. Thank you.
Thank you, Kishore, for that 5 minutes. Yeah, many of you want to ask questions. Prepare yourself. Short and sharp question to Kishore. But the guru now will be Raja Mohan. You can wrap it up for us. Yeah, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for that. You've already seen so much has been said already. So since I'm following Kishore, I'll stick to 3 points, much like him, which the 3 points that are at the center of the current disorder, the global disorder, rather than order. Minister Balakrishnan earlier in the day talked about how many of our assumptions, in fact, the assumptions that guided India-ASEAN engagement and the world as a whole since 1992, those are under severe stress. So what are the 3 issues that are at the center of this on the new thinking that is just beginning to be with us? One is the threat to globalization that we had taken for granted in 1992, but today we have to deal with the fact that many leading developed countries are beginning to be disenchanted with globalization. So how are we going to deal with it? That's going to be one problem. The second problem, I think, is about security in a world where there's a huge power shift, where there is uncertainty about America's evolution and American alliances. There is the dramatic rise of China and its assertiveness and its consequences for the region as a whole. The third aspect I think we have to deal with is how we think about our location and our space. Our mental maps that were defined in one particular form are no longer valid as new ways of thinking about a region that we must deal with. So let these 3 points, on globalization, on security, and on the changing mental maps. So the first, on the question of globalization, the fact that Trump is only one part of the problem. There are losers from globalization today. As many people here have said, Asia has been a very good student of globalization. Asia has done well today, and that shift in power and wealth is creating losers in those who taught us the virtues of globalization. And I think that's what Trump represented. And I think this problem is not going to go away with Mr. Trump going away, because in any case, Mr. Bernie Sanders was saying much the same things against free trade agreements, against globalization. So that problem is going to be with us, and dealing with it, I think, is going to be even more complicated by the technological transformation. My Minister talked about, or Malaysian Minister talked about it, that the dramatic transformation of technology that is taking place, which is going to make it worse of the challenges that are produced by globalization. And I think to deal with this, I think India and ASEAN must, one, salvage globalization. Now, China has talked about taking leadership from the Americans. That's a welcome suggestion, but I think we still don't know how the Chinese leadership is going to play out. But for us, therefore, that we've not taken full advantage of what we need to do together. Trade, as somebody said, is at a very low level. Physical, digital connectivity is at a low level. Therefore, I think we need to demonstrate, one, that we're ready to step up to the plate and do more on economic integration between ourselves. Second, I think the question of connectivity, which China has put front and center today, and that we must make sure that this connectivity is in the interest of all the countries. That again, I think what India and the ASEAN must demonstrate, it is possible to do connectivity in a form that is beneficial for everyone. Third, I think in relation to this, that especially on the technological domain, if we can demonstrate, India and ASEAN, yesterday Minister Ishwaran, today morning Minister Balakrishnan, both have talked about using technological transformation, the new questions of innovation, that can we do things together to demonstrate that the technological transformation can be leveraged for the benefit of most people. That, I think, is something we need to do. The second set of issues on the power shift and what it does to the balance of power in this part of the world. Now here, I think the fact that Singapore, no country knows this better than Singapore, that don't rely too much on the great powers. That 1942, when the British Empire, the mightiest of the time, fell in Singapore, the assumption that the British Empire was permanent, you saw in dramatic 2-year short time of Japanese entry into Southeast Asia, British Empire had to pull back. Now, those kind of uncertainties of what happens between the major powers is going to be a fact of life. Singapore had a second experience in 1968-70 when the mighty British Empire withdrew from east of Suez. Therefore, this idea that we can rely on the goodwill of the great powers to make sure that we have the security under which our prosperity can flourish will be a fundamental mistake. You cannot leave it to the big boys. So what do you do as middle powers, as India as a middle power, and ASEAN as an important entity which has all the indicators of a middle power, that we need to get together, we need to do more on the security question between ourselves. The more we do with each other, the greater chance we'll be able to influence what happens between America and China. Otherwise, you can stand and pray that the Americans and the Chinese will get along, or they'll be well behaved. And I think the only way to hedge against that, to ensure against that, is that we do more between ourselves. And I think that we've seen some beginning of that between India and Singapore. Recently, the defense agreement. We need more of those, both bilaterally as well as collectively between India and the ASEAN. The third, the last point on space. When Mr. Trump came to Asia and talked about Indo-Pacific, a lot of people were surprised in the region. America is now saying America is to the east and India to the west. That is the new Indo-Pacific. Now, a lot of people might think, look, this is something about putting India into the Pacific. It's not just that. What we've seen happen, I think, the rise of China, the advance of ASEAN, and the emergence of India have expanded the space in which we operate. And I think that's a reality, and I think that reality is going to be with us. And therefore, idea of Asia-Pacific will inevitably make way to Indo-Pacific. China is going to play a larger role in the Indian Ocean. India must play a larger role in the Pacific Ocean. But at the center of it all is the ASEAN. Southeast Asia is the center and the fulcrum of a future Indo-Pacific. Therefore, ASEAN centrality, or Southeast Asian centrality, is going to be even more magnified in an Indo-Pacific theater. Therefore, I think preserving ASEAN's coherence, making sure that the ASEAN, which has served as a valuable platform in the last 30, 40 years to produce peace and prosperity in the region, that I think India has great stakes in ensuring the survival of the ASEAN as a coherent platform. And I think this is where the responsibility on India, we have a representative of the ministry here, that we need to do a lot more to ensure, to support those who want to maintain ASEAN centrality in this part of the world. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Raja Mohan. Okay, question.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, some house rules before we begin. We have scheduled 15 minutes for the Q&A, and we have to be very fair. So we have, once again, we do have each of our mic assistants and the ushers. May we please start from the left and try our very best to answer as many questions as possible. A request from Ambassador Ong and myself. Please once again tell us which member of the distinguished panel you'd like to pose a question to, and most importantly, please keep it on point. May we start from the extreme left, please? Hello. On the extreme left, please.
Hello. Hello. Good afternoon, distinguished panel members. I have a very direct question, and I apologize for being too direct, but with the talk of ASEAN centrality, we are talking about a power balancing. So the last time there was such a struggle for power, we witnessed world wars, we also witnessed the Cold War. So my question is, how imminent is a World War III, and what are the countries doing to prepare it? Like, aside from our diplomatic talks about averting it, how imminent is it? How is it in the realm of our reality, is my question. And this is for all the panel members to answer. Thank you.
Let's collect one or two more. Yeah.
Okay. On our second question, sir, please.
Hello, I'm Hari from VV of Singapore. Good morning to everybody. Good afternoon to everybody. My question is, if you talk about so much of synergy between India and ASEAN and the 1,000 years of linkages, do you think co-opting India into ASEAN would be a good planning? This is my question.
Repeat, please. We didn't get you.
With years of linkages, now we are talking about ASEAN and India. Do you think India could also become a part of ASEAN rather than talking about India and ASEAN being a two divided?
Okay, ASEAN becoming part of India becoming part of ASEAN. All right. The
Ambassador,
next question.
one more?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. May I? Keng Yong, my turn?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, Chair, I'd like to address this question to the Minister here. Last night, I made the point to Secretary Saran that if you really want to get close to ASEAN, trade is key, trade is strategy, and that India should not come in the way of the RCEP. And the point she made to me was that for RCEP means comprehensive economic partnership, and for India, services is key. I want to ask you, as the only person on this panel with executive powers, is ASEAN willing to meet India's demands on services, so that RCEP can move forward, and that India does not come in the way of that? Thank you.
Okay, we finish history first. Madam Preeti, you want to go for it?
No, I think the question on the executive powers was addressed to the minister, not to me. I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to assume that I have such strong executive powers. But thank you for those questions. On the first one, I would definitely like to pass it on to my fellow panelists about whether the Third World War is imminent. Not a soothsayer, but certainly we are all watching developments. As far as India is concerned, I would just like to say that we have always been, of course, we all work in our national interests, but as far as India's engagement with ASEAN is concerned, and the fact that it has deepened, notwithstanding the frustration, including articulated by the panelists, that we could do better. I would say 3 points. One, that, even as it stands today, where I'm very sanguine about India-ASEAN future relations is the fact that, one, it is on a very strong foundation of very strong cultural and civilizational linkages. Secondly, the fact that it is an issues-free relationship, that we have no legacy of an unpleasant history, there are no competing territorial claims. In fact, what we see today is a welcoming by the ASEAN member countries for a greater participation of India in the regional security architecture, on the one hand. And on the other hand, India's own very strong support to what Dr. Raja Mohan mentioned about maintaining ASEAN's coherence, centrality in the changing security architecture here. So here it is a very complementary relationship. Number 3, as we expand our trade and investment relationship, of course, while we could do better, we've done a lot as well. Today, ASEAN is India's 4th largest trading partner, and India is ASEAN's 7th largest trading partner. Again, there was a mention about connectivity. When we look at just the map of the region, it is not very often understood how the easternmost islands of India are actually just about 100 nautical miles from Indonesia. And so when we look at India's position within the ASEAN, we look at ASEAN as our extended neighborhood. And where we share, of course, land boundaries directly with Myanmar, but we also share maritime boundaries with several others. So we really regard them as our maritime neighbors as well. Which brings me to the next question about whether it would be a good idea to have India and ASEAN. Already our engagement is extremely intense. And we engage with ASEAN directly in the context of the India-ASEAN several government-to-government level engagements, whether it's a summit level, ministerial, cutting across almost 17 sectors. But there are 2 countries of ASEAN who are also part of the BIMSTEC, where India, along with some other South Asian countries, are also members. As also, India participates very actively within a sub-regional context of ASEAN of the Mekong-Ganga cooperation. So there are already these overlapping arrangements that are happening. And so to the extent that whether it's a good idea to have India within ASEAN, I think it's a great idea. But a lot is already happening without it being formulated. Finally, on the third question of RCEP, I think the question was addressed to the Honorable Minister from Malaysia. And I think you're the one with the executive power, sir. So I hope you will address India's concerns on RCEP. I would just like to say that there is somehow this perception that India is being defensive on RCEP negotiations, and I would like to explode that myth. India has remained very strongly committed, of course, to globalization. We were a protected economy. We haven't reached a stage of development, as several other partners have, when we participated in the WTO, as we participate even within RCEP. What should be understood very categorically, and that was explained yesterday as well, was that already amongst several countries who are participating in the RCEP negotiations, you've nearly reached almost 1 to 2% tariffs, whereas India is expected to lower down its tariffs substantially to the tune of 50 to 60%. Of course, India is a very attractive market if it opens up that much more. But please remember that India also has its own sensitivities on the goods side. Our strengths lie in the services sector, and what we are saying repeatedly in our negotiations, and I think it will be difficult to predict how the negotiations move, but I'd just like to reiterate that India remains very strongly committed to RCEP, and that we would be happy to have it negotiated and concluded soonest. However, what we are looking for is a balanced outcome which takes on board the concerns that if India is expected to lower down its tariffs at a huge cost of a developing country, that will lose a huge amount of revenue, where it has more than $80 billion trade deficit with the RCEP countries put together. There has to be some comfort that should be provided on the other sectors as well. And that is where we come from, but be happy to hear, Minister, your views on it.
I think, Kishore, can you quickly answer the World War III question, since it's the first one posed?
Well, let me begin with the good news. I'm prepared to take bets with any of you. Next 10 years, no World War III. Come and see me after that. I'll give you odds even.
Okay, 10 years' time, Pravasi come back to Singapore, and then we examine that question.
But let me just quickly make the point that, there is data to back up the point that over a long-term historical trend, wars are becoming a sunset industry. Just to give you one sort of figures, in the 1950s, about 500,000 people used to die in conflicts, and now it's down to 20 or 30,000, and it's a long-term declining trend. There's a Harvard professor, Steven Pinker, who gives you all the data. You can look it up on the internet. But the second question actually about ASEAN and India is a more important one. Can India join ASEAN? And the answer is no. Because India's population actually is twice that of ASEAN combined. But you can have a much more significant relationship between India and ASEAN, building, as I said, on trust and old historical relations. And in fact, next week, I'll be in Mumbai on 16th January and Delhi on 18th January to launch my book, the Indian edition of my book, The ASEAN Miracle. And the sad part about the ASEAN story is that ASEAN actually has done not just the region, but all the great powers of the world a big favor by providing the only trusted geopolitical platform where all the great powers can talk to each other. Look around the world. Nobody except ASEAN can do this. This is a big service that ASEAN has been doing. And even though my good friend Raja Mohan describes India as a middle power, actually you're already a great power. In PPP terms, by the way, number one economy is China, number two is United States, number three is India. And by 2050, number one will be China, number two will be India. You have to prepare for a world in which India is going to become a far greater influence. But the one organization that can facilitate India's peaceful rise is ASEAN. ASEAN is a geopolitical gift to India that it should make better use of.
Okay, before I give the floor to Raja Mohan and Senator Davamoni, maybe we have 2 or 3 more questions, and then...
We have time for just one more question, Ambassador.
So, I've Who held the mic? So, here. Here.
Hello.
I have the mic. Can I ask the question?
Where are you?
I'm here.
Where?
I'm here.
Oh.
Uh,
Okay,
so-
okay. Quickly,
Yes.
30 second question. Quick.
So my question is to Dr. Raja Mohan. So with India's increasing engagement with ASEAN through Act East and China through the OBOR, which has, so the ASEAN has the potential to become a next battleground of these two behemoths. So how do you think these two ideas and infrastructure projects would actually shape ASEAN as a region?
Okay. Any more
Final-
here?
final one from the
Yeah,
gentleman
final
with
one.
the
Yeah,
blue
okay.
My name is Bharat, and my question is to Mr. Kishore Mehbubani. As Dr. Raja Mohan said, the disorder is largely driven by the current look inward or America First policy of Donald Trump and the current politicians. My question is how irreversible or irrevocable this situation is. Because if it's a mistake, you think the circumstances or changes could reverse this approach from United States and change the game again. Thank you.
Okay, Raja Mohan, please. Short and sharp.
I think we're not in, I don't think India sees itself in some kind of a contestation with China for the battlefield of ASEAN. I don't think India sees it that way. I think the way India should see it is that there is a huge unrealized potential for connectivity, economic integration that remains unfulfilled. So we need to do that on our own. And this need not be measured by what China does or China does not do. China is not stopping us from trading with ASEAN. So it is our business, and I think what we need to do bilaterally is far more consequential than creating this very grand argument about India trying to compete with China. I think at this point, that would really be infructuous. Second, I think I would say that India needs to be modest. While the aspiration to be a great power is real, that at some point India would become the third largest economy. But at this point, India's focus must necessarily be on its internal development and how it can use cooperation with ASEAN to accelerate its internal development.
Kishore, quickly, your response to that last question.
On the United States and what happens after Trump, I actually am optimistic about the United States. It is a strong society. It's got strong institutions. Trump clearly is an exception. We will have 2 or 3 more, maybe rocky years ahead of us. But after that, the long-term historical trend where American interests in a stable Asia-Pacific region will come back. And so the United States presence will continue. The biggest challenge is how the United States handles China. And I think that's where ASEAN, frankly, can still make a very important contribution because, as you know, ASEAN provides one of the places where the Chinese and American foreign ministers come to meet, where the American and Chinese presidents come to meet. And that's why if we strengthen ASEAN, we can actually provide a smooth transition to a new global order.
Okay, Dato', 1 minute, because we have to give Miss Pretty a closing remark.
I shall not say anything. He's given me 1 minute. Thank you very much. On the services industry, I agree that India has much to offer. But I must tell you that to my office in the economic planning unit, I have Chinese coming to see me every week. Chinese companies. I only have Indian companies coming and seeing me 3 months once. They're very aggressive. Very aggressive. And you need to, whatever you can say, we can talk about macro policies, the global order, but that is very, very intellectual, very nice to hear. Let it be. If you want to grow with ASEAN, you have to come and see us, people to people. And from there, get your chambers involved. And then, my Prime Minister has visited India, like no other Prime Minister have done. This month, and we are going to India on the ASEAN Leaders Conference. Before February, I went with him to India. Imagine he's trying to create this connectivity, understands India's power. I'm sure Singapore is doing this because they realize the connectivity is important. Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia is going to grow. So this Southeast Asia is going to be the focus. Now, how are you going to bring you all here closer? You're not here to do an intellectual discourse on America, China, and India. Already all in the plate. Now, how do you move forward this business? One is, if you want services, for example, India, tourism, agro, food, and digital. We are very much Indian side in Malaysia. But it's not at worker level. As what Mr. Raj said, we have to improve the quality of people. Automation, digitalization, the brains India has got to offer. You use your DNA revolution. Build yourself up and come and see us. Things are moving. Let's see how we can. And a lot of ASEAN companies are in Malaysia now. In Malaysia. So you can leverage here and move forward. So I think it's more on policies by the leaders, the chambers, connectivity, and the people-to-people companies, which we are willing to facilitate. I agree with you, sir. Services is going to be the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Preeti?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity once again. I think some very important ideas have come, and I just thought I'd flag 2, 3 where we are already. For example, some connectivity was something that Dr. Raja Mohan mentioned, and in fact, in the run-up to the summit that's going to take place, we've had almost 100 activities, a series of events. And I can tell you, as far as Government of India is concerned, the focus for us, in fact, has been to enhance connectivity. And we did organize a very successful summit in November called the ASEAN India Connectivity Summit. Just a week before the actual summit takes place, the commemorative one, we've organized another very major economic, trade, and investment summit. Now, that will show the focus that we are attaching in our engagement. It is work in progress. We could do better. But I think today, just as Honorable Minister mentioned that you don't find enough Indian companies aggressively quoting in ASEAN, yes, it is incumbent upon the Indian companies to be more present here. But equally, it is incumbent upon the ASEAN private sector also to look at the opportunities that India today offers in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of the number of reforms that have taken place. That story, even if it's heard, is not understood as well as it should be. And I think it provides an immense opportunity. Today, if there's two-way investment, it's more, I think, largely because of India-Singapore investment. But I think there are very dynamic companies within the ASEAN region who could take advantage of the opening up, and including FDI. Today we are one of the most open economies in terms of attracting FDI. It provides, again, another very important opportunity. And I think with greater economic integration, with greater connectivity, whether it's physical, through maritime routes, air links, land routes, where there's some work already in progress. And yesterday there was a panel discussion which focused on that. I think we would get there. I think I would still like to view this extremely positively while the government's at it. I think it is going to be a collective effort of the commercial community, the business community, along with the intergovernmental processes that are underway. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we should conclude this interesting discussion. Sorry, we can't go around to everybody, but I think people are waiting for their lunch, and some of the VIPs are expecting some of our panelists to join them. So thank you for your attention, and all the best to ASEAN-India partnership.